Hi everyone, it's Craig Pollard from CTMA Workplace Consulting, and I'm here to give you a bit of training, a bit of a start on how to interpret an award. So we're going to be looking at the major clauses. We're not going to go through the awards clause by clause, but what we're going to do is have a look at the major terms and the major provisions that all awards have in common, and how you can work through those clauses and get a better understanding of what you're supposed to be doing to comply. Okay. As always, if you've got any questions or there's any specific issues you would like addressed, shoot us an email at ir@nbia.org.au and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. So, what are awards? Well, modern awards are statutory instruments. They're documents that are published by the Fair Work Commission. They're actually written by the Fair Work Commission. And the Fair Work Act says that an award has to provide a fair minimum standard of employment conditions for employees who work within the federal jurisdiction. So there are people who obviously are not covered in the federal jurisdiction, people who are employed by state governments, local councils, people in Western Australia. They don't fall within the jurisdiction, but anybody else working in Australia in a private business is covered. Modern awards don't cover absolutely everybody. They're designed to cover as many people as possible. So they don't cover senior managers or some classes of employees such as HR managers, industrial relations folks like myself. They don't cover they don't cover salespeople working in the wholesale industry, marketing folks, IT normally. There are some exceptions to that, but there are a large number of people who are not covered by federal awards. But all of the employees in the baking industry are most certainly covered by a federal award. So an award used to be a negotiated document between unions and employer associations. And the awards were the documents that were used to settle industrial disputes. Now, that changed in 2006. So I'm not going to give you a full history lesson going back to the 1850s and 1904 and so on. Suffice to say that they have changed. So instead, what we have now is a legislative minimum with the Fair Work Commission to determine, based on evidence and inquiry, what were reasonable conditions to impose in the awards. So in 2009, we have the Rudd Labor government created modern awards as we now know them. Awards are mostly industry-based and cover the employees that work within that industry in the one document. So, for example, Food, Beverage, Tobacco Manufacturing Award, that will cover people who clean only, who work for a business in that industry. They will cover people who work in the loading dock. That award covers people who work on the production floor. It covers people who do associated tasks within the business with that sort of focus. It doesn't cover people like clerks. Clerks have their own award, and it doesn't cover people who are contractors. So, for example, if you employ or engage contract cleaners, they're not covered by the Food, Bev, Tobacco Award. They're covered by the Cleaning Services Award. So there are some basic rules in awards. You can't contract out of an award condition. So if an employee states, look, I'll work for $15 an hour, I'm desperate for a job, you might need somebody, but you can't really afford the award wage. So they seem willing, okay, fine, I'll pay you $15. You can't do that, because what happens is you are amassing a debt, and that employee can come and collect that debt at any point in the next 7 years. So that debt is with you for a long time. Furthermore, if they go to the Fair Work Ombudsman, they can say, look, I agreed I was desperate, but quite frankly, I shouldn't have been employed on these terms and conditions. The Fair Work Ombudsman doesn't care what they agreed with, doesn't care that they asked for that rate. All they care about is that there was a statutory minimum, you didn't pay it, and so now you owe some money, and a penalty for not paying in accordance with the award. So that's the thing. These penalties are huge. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for not paying in accordance with the award. So just don't try it. Now, we've also got what's called the National Employment Standards. So the National Employment Standards, it's best to think of it like this. We have the Fair Work Act, which is the floor. That is the basis upon which all industrial law and terms and conditions of employment are based. On top of that floor, we have the National Employment Standards. And the National Employment Standards is written into the Act, and it says that all employees are entitled to these 10 minimum entitlements. And every employer working in Australia, other than WA, who works in the private sector, whether they're a partnership, company, sole trader, trust, whatever, has to ensure that their staff receive no less than the National Employment Standards. Now, on top of that National Employment Standards then sit awards. And the awards can offer additional things to the National Employment Standards. So, for example, if the National Employment Standard says that you get 4 weeks leave per annum, an award can say, such as the Pilots Award, can say, actually, you get 6 weeks annual leave per annum. You can do that. What an award can't say is employees only get 3 weeks annual leave per annum, because that is less than the National Employment Standards. It's the same for casual loading. There's a National Employment Standard for casual loading, 25%. Long service leave, personal carers leave, all of those sorts of things are specified in the NES, and an award can't provide for less than that. Okay, so when you're looking at a modern award, they all look the same. They're all structured in largely the same way, but a few minor technical differences, but to be honest with you, they're largely the same. So the 6 main parts are application and operation, consultation and dispute resolution, types of employment and termination of employment, wage rates, hours of work, and leave provision. Now, it's not necessarily in this order. That's just how the awards are broken up, how the different sections sit together. There's also a series of appendices, and normally, to be honest with you, only the classification structure really gets looked at. But there's an appendice there that covers things like applying for annual leave in advance, and there's a template form that you can use as an example. There is a template for, there's a schedule for trainee rates of pay, and when you look up the trainee rates of pay, it says refer to the miscellaneous award, because they got sick and tired of repeating themselves at the end of every single award. There will be a schedule, more than likely, that sets out the a new schedule that's been added to most awards now is the hourly rates of pay for shift work, overtime, all that sort of stuff. So it's got summaries of rates of pay as well. There are differences amongst awards about what those schedules are, but largely the first schedule is classification structure. The second schedule is the summary of rates of pay. Then there will be the agreement for annual payout of annual leave, taking annual leave early, and an agreement to amend hours of work, for example. So what is my award and how do you work it out? Well, there's two clauses you need to consider when determining what award covers your business. The first is coverage, and the second is definitions and interpretation. So whilst there is a baking industry, inverted commas, there's no specific award for that baking industry. Now, I know I said that we talk about industry awards, but when you think about it, the baking industry is broken up into a number of different segments. So you've got a segment that works retail. So you've got your traditional retail baker's shop, where you've got the bakers producing out the back and the staff, shop staff selling out the front. Okay, So that's a retail operation. Then you've got a manufacturing operation where you've got a factory producing sourdough or gluten-free products or cakes, and they don't have a shop front. They might deliver wholesale to supermarkets, to other bakeries as cold spots, or to restaurants and cafes. So they're a large-scale manufacturing organisation. And then you got others that might be making pies only, and they sell in a food court. Okay, so there's different parts to the baking industry, and they operate in different places and in different ways. And so that's why we need to have a look at the coverage and definitions provisions of these awards to see which one most closely approximates the industry and the work you do, the industry you're in and the work you do. So the coverage clause is normally clause 4. So you normally flick straight to clause 4. And this is from the General Retail Industry Award. And it says this industry award covers, to the exclusion of any other modern award, employers in the general retail industry throughout Australia and employees for whom classifications are in the classification schedule. So as I said, the first schedule is classification structure. So you have to both be in the general retail industry, and there has to be a classification for you in the classification structure for you to be covered by this award. So what is a general retail? Well, a general retail is defined as the retail sale of or hire of goods or services for personal, household, or business consumption, right? And this is why if you're manufacturing for cafes, restaurants, or cold spot bakeries, or any other sort of operation like that, you can't be covered by this award because you're selling the goods to a third party who then on-sells it to a consumer. This award only covers those businesses who sell to consumers, whether that consumer is a business or an individual. So in clothing, food and furniture, household goods and personal recreation, and bakery shops at which the predominant activity is baking products for sale on the premises. And that's because you've got the retail sale of food at B. Okay, so they've added in this bakery shops where the predominant activity is baking products for sale on the premises. And that's the defining factor. And when we're talking predominant activity, you're looking at more than 50%. So more than 50% of, if more than 50% of what you make out the back is sold out the front to retail customers, you are covered by this award. If you have 50% of your business being going to cafes, restaurants, other bakeries, whatever, and 30%, say, is being sold out the front, well, then you're not covered by the retail award. Okay, that doesn't reflect what you do. It's sort of like almost an add-on out the front, and so therefore your staff are not covered by that award. So then you have a look at the sorry, and this one's from the Food, Beverage and Tobacco Manufacturing Award, not the General Retail Industry Award. I apologise. I'll correct that on the slides if you want to see the slides separately. So this industry award covers employers throughout Australia in the food, beverage and tobacco manufacturing industry. And that defines that industry as cooking, baking, blending, brewing, blah, 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 refrigerating, decorating, blah, 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 and milling of food, including stock food, beverage, blah, 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 and such as. And then it goes into all of the things that go into producing food on a wholesale basis. Okay. And then it specifically says it does not cover employers or employees who are covered by Clark's, fast food, or the General Retail Industry Award. And there are others, but they're just not relevant to our discussion. So if you're not covered by the General Retail Award and you're covered and you're manufacturing food in this sort of environment, then this could be the award for you. But then you say, well, hang on a minute, what about I make pies and we sell out the front of a food court? Well, then you'd have a look at the coverage clause of the fast food award, Because you're looking at this going, well, that doesn't really suit, this one doesn't suit me. The retail one doesn't really suit me. What about fast food? So you have a look at the fast food one, and sure enough, it says if you're producing food and selling it out the front in food court type arrangements, then that's the award that applies. Okay, so this is the clause that you look at. This is the defining factor that determines whether your award is food, beverage, tobacco, general retail, fast food, or another. If you're producing bread, cakes, and so on, and you have most of your business, most of the sales of your business is made by selling those cakes, bread products, and whatever to customers who sit down and eat at tables, drink coffee, and so on, well, then you could be covered by the restaurant industry award. You need to carefully consider what it is that is the nature of your business. What does it most closely resemble? And then have a look at awards that factor in that area. So where you're covered by more than one award, or where you could be covered by more than one award, and this does happen, you determine the award classification which is most appropriate to the work performed by the employee and to the environment which the employee normally performs the work. So there are some employers that have large operations, and they may, for example, have a manufacturing plant for wholesale bread products, and they might have retail bakeries, cold spots mainly. And so they're covered by the Food, Beverage, Tobacco Award, and they're covered by the General Retail Industry Award. So I've got this employee that might travel between them and do different things. So they might do a bit of production, and then they come out here and they'll do the shop front. Which one do I pay them under, or do I have to pay them under both? Well, the answer is, what do they spend the majority of their time doing? And what do those tasks characterize them to be? So if they're doing the majority of their day in production, and they might go out and do shop fronts for 2 hours, then they're employed as a production worker who also does these other tasks. So you'd pay them accordingly, right, as a production worker. But if they do production for, say, 90 minutes a day, and then you've got them going out doing presentation and might be training out at the stores, well, then they're a retail worker. All right, it's the work that they're doing and the environment they're doing it in that they normally perform the work that defines which award will cover them. Don't have to cover them under two. Where there's no classification for a particular employee, there is a chance that the employee may be award free. Okay, don't discount that. It's unusual. It's becoming less common, because anytime the Commission finds such a position, they tend to adjust the classification structure or the definitions to include them. Okay, because the goal is to have as many people covered by an award safety net as possible. But it is possible to have award-free workers. Okay, so once we've decided which award applies, we then need to have a look at what type of employee we want and what rules apply to those employees. So the types of employees are full-time, part-time, and casual. All right, ignore everything else. Fixed term, long-term, permanent. Those terms are meaningless. The thing is, you've got full-time, part-time, and casual. Casual conversion rules apply for casual employees engaged on a regular and systematic basis for a specified time. So the rules now changed a bit, but the casual employee has to work for you for at least 12 months. And over the previous 6 months of their employment, they have to have worked on a regular and systematic basis to be able to meet the tests to possibly be converted. Now, the rules are, if you are a large employer, you have to go to employees and say, hey, you're qualified. But if you're a small employer, they have to come to you. I won't get into that because that's a different seminar, but essentially what you need to know is that there are only 3 types of employees, right? Full-time, part-time, casual. Full-time is 38 hours a week. in every award that's relevant. It's 38 hours. That means that you cannot that your employee cannot be paid for less than 38 ordinary hours in a week, unless they're on unapproved leave or unpaid leave. Part-time can work an average of less than 38 hours a week, but there are clauses in the award and in the types of employment clause where it sets out what the rules are for part-time. You will see whether there has to be an average of so many hours a week. Most awards nowadays, though, only say that part-time employees are engaged for a minimum of so many hours per day or per engagement. So you can engage a part-time employee to work 2 hours per week. Okay, that's it. That's all they get. That's all you're obligated to give them. And then the casual clause has the rules allowing, setting out what the arrangements are for casuals. In our industry, there aren't really many rules. There's no restrictions on how often and how regularly you can work casuals. There is a minimum that you have to offer them each time you bring them into work, but there's no maximum number of hours. You can engage them to work 38 ordinary hours a week as a casual if you want. So once you've decided whether or not you want a full-time, part-time or casual employee, the next thing to determine is the classification level. Now, the important thing to remember is it's not what their job title is that defines their classification level. It's the duties they perform that defines the classification level. So it doesn't matter what their pay rate is. It doesn't matter what they think they should be on. It matters what they do. Now, where it gets tricky, and I do say that a lot, I apologize, but it does, is where you've got someone with a baking qualification who comes to you and says, yeah, but I don't want to be paid as a baker. I just want to do production work and be paid as a production worker. That's not an option, okay? Under the award, if you employ a baker and they're doing baking type duties, they have to be paid as a baker, all right? If you employ someone with a doctorate and they've done their PhD in gluten and yeast management, I'm a baker by trade, so I should know these things. But anyway, but they've got a doctorate. They're not entitled to be paid any more than level 4 in the retail award, level 5 in the food, beverage, tobacco manufacturing award. Their entitlement is they're coming in to do production work as a baker. Doesn't matter what their class qualification is. The only qualification that matters is the trade qualification, and that sets it at those levels. But you most certainly cannot employ somebody who is a qualified baker or has a trade qualification at less than the trade rate. So when we're talking with people about roles other than bakers, that's when it gets a bit tricky. You need to have a look at what the duties are. It's all the duties, right? It's as a whole. You need to think, well, we need a shop person. We need somebody to help out the front. Okay, that sounds easy. In the retail award, that's level 1. But what happens if they have to lock up the shop at the end of the night? So they get a key. Or they have to count money at the end of the shift. Or they might have to do banking occasionally. Well, all of a sudden, that level 1 worker has just become level 3 because those tasks are stipulated in level 3 of the classification structure in the retail award. So you have to be very, very specific about what it is you want your staff to do. If you can't afford to pay a level 3 rate, you have to make absolutely sure that your person is not doing duties that bring them within that level 3 classification. Okay, so if you can't afford level 3, you make damn sure that you go down as the owner or manager and lock up that shop at night. You do the cash. All they have to do is clean the store, get it ready, you come in, secure it, and they go home. Okay, that's what you have to check. Check the duties very carefully in the classification structure and pick the appropriate one. It's not a simple matter of saying, oh, all my shop staff are level 1s. That's not necessarily the case. Now, hours of work. Hours of work covers two things: ordinary hours of work and overtime hours of work. Ordinary hours are those specified in the provisions dealing with day work and shift work. A classic example in the retail award. In the retail award, you've got, and the others don't really matter because they do 24 hours. You can do 24 hours fast food, 24 hours in a restaurant, 24 hours in food, beverage, tobacco manufacturing. But in retail, if you're working in the shop front as a retail support worker or a retail worker, you can only work ordinary hours after 5 a.m., after 7 a.m. and before 5 a.m. So between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. every morning, there is a block of 2 hours that an employee in the retail area cannot perform ordinary hours of work. They can't get paid shift rates because there is no shift rates for those 2 hours of work. It is overtime. So apart from that, you can work any person at any time and it's paid, and it can be paid at an ordinary rate of pay, although there may be a shift penalty applicable. So for example, if we're looking at baking production workers can work 24 hours a day, and there will be a shift rate applicable for one of those shifts. So either 12.5% or 15%, depending on the shift. But for the retail workers who work out the front, so not involved in bakery production, they are restricted. So if you've got your bakery, your retail worker coming in at 5 a.m. to serve the tradies, from 5 to 7, they're on overtime. So you have to be very careful with the people you employ, the times you employ them, to make sure that you are working within the boundaries of that award. So what you're looking at is you're looking for the times in the hours of work clause that says day work can be performed between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. That's what it says in the retail award. Or in the food, beverage, tobacco, it'll be from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Okay, so that's day work. And then in a different section, you'll have the shift work provisions. Okay, so the shift work provisions are a completely different section in most cases, and that will specify what hours apply to particular shifts. And then it'll say, okay, for an afternoon shift is defined as a shift that finishes between 9 p.m. and midnight in the retail award, or 6 p.m. and midnight in the food, beverage, tobacco. And then it'll say payment for work on afternoon shift shall be at the ordinary rate plus an allowance of, or a shift penalty of 15% or something like that. Okay. So you have to look at the hours that you want to roster somebody, and then look in the award and say, well, what hours does the award say this person can work, and how much is payable for those hours? But then you've got overtime, and the overtime hours are hours worked in addition to or outside of ordinary hours. And the reason the outside of ordinary hours goes back to that example I was talking about earlier, 5 and 7, between 5 and 7 in the retail award. So between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., it's not in addition to ordinary hours because they haven't worked ordinary hours yet. It's outside of ordinary hours. And that being the case, of course, there's no superannuation calculated on those hours. So it's all, that can be quite complex, and the provisions vary between the different awards that cover our industry. Now, deciding wage rates. Now, I say you've got a choice. So we know what award you're covered by now. We know what sort of employee you want to hire, full-time, part-time, casual. We know what hours we want them to work. We want them to work an afternoon shift, and we want them to work Thursday through to Thursday through to Monday. All right, so that means that they're going to get weekend penalties, they're going to get shift penalties, and so on. The choice you then have is, do I pay just the award rate of pay and then the penalties every week and do the sums, or do I pay a salary? That's your choice. But a salary does not mean that you're no longer up for the award entitlements. It doesn't absolve you of them. It doesn't free you from them. It just, what you're doing is you're saying to your employee, look, how about we pay your award rates or your award entitlements in a slightly different way. So instead of paying a fluctuating wage depending on the roster that you've got them working from week to week, we'll pay you a flat rate per week, and there's swings and roundabouts. This week you'll get paid much more than the award. This week you'll be paid about what the award would have entitled you to, or whatever the case may be. But if you choose this option, right, then you have to include a paragraph like this in your contract. So your salary is calculated to include payment of all hours of work, penalty rates, overtime, and other award entitlements which may otherwise be payable. As such, no further payments will be made in relation to such entitlements, right? And the reason for that is if you don't have that clause in there, what could happen is either they or the Fair Work Ombudsman could come back and say, well, where's your agreement to say that you will pay a salary or average out the salary over a period of time? Where's your agreement that he wouldn't be paid the award rate every week? And if you haven't got one, your contract doesn't say it, then some weeks they're wildly overpaid, but some weeks they're underpaid and you owe them money. That's the problem. The other issue is if they work overtime and you don't do this, overtime will be calculated on the salary rate of salary hourly rate, right? So let's assume you're paying somebody, and for the sake of ease of calculation, I don't know, $1,000 an hour, right? You're paying someone $1,000 an hour, and that means they get $38,000 a week. And the award says that they're supposed to get $27.50 per hour, and then time and a half for the first 3 hours and double time thereafter for overtime, and 15% for working a shift. It doesn't say time and a half of the award rate, double time of the award rate, and it doesn't say 15% of the award rate. It says double time and a half, or time and a half and double time of the employee's rate of pay. So if the employee's rate of pay is $10,000 an hour, you owe a whole lot more than what you think you do. And that's why it's got to be very carefully written. And that's just ironing up my point. So most allowances now are calculated on what's called the standard rate. So what is the standard rate? Well, let me have a look here. Let me just dig up, and I'll dig up the General Retail Award because it's what I've been talking about. And this will probably be easier. So I'll just share the screen for the General Retail Industry Award. Yep. All right. So you should see this now. So if we go down to definitions, what you're looking for in clause 2 definitions, it's nearly always clause 2, is the definition of standard rate. And here we've got two. We've got a standard hourly rate and a standard weekly rate. So the standard hourly rate means a minimum hourly rate for retail employee level 4, and the weekly rate is again the weekly rate for an employee level 4. Now, of course, in the General Retail Award, that's the trades rate. All right, that's a tradesperson's rate. It's not always that, so it's always very important to have a look at that definition. Okay, so you look at that definition and you see there that's what it is. So when you go to down here to allowances and clause 19 in this one, we go to allowances. You've got just trying to find the cold work allowance. No, where is it? You know, it's funny, I say these things and all of a sudden they actually plonk in the actual rate. But these rates, cold work allowance and so on, is actually calculated in accordance with a percentage of the standard rate. And that's how, when I do the allowances shed classification pay rates, that's how we get to the figures we get to, and they're all in line with this. But yeah, so it's actually it used to specify, and this is a very brand new thing here, that they don't have in accordance with the percentage of the standard rate. So, but that's where these rates come from. They're a percentage of that standard rate. And if we go down to summaries, you can see here what I'm talking about. So they've specified the rates in the clause, but if you look here, the first aid allowance is 1.3% of the standard weekly rate, and you get $12.94, okay? Liquor license allowance, not applicable for us really, but just to show you, it's 3.1% of the standard weekly rate. And then down here, the cold work disability ones, they're 1.3% of the hourly rate. So that's how the calculation works. Just to show you, I'm not lying. Okay. So that's essentially setting up the employment relationship. That's how you interpret the award to set up your employment relationship. Very first step, what do we need an employee? Number two, if we do need an employee, what award's going to apply? Well, for that, you need to look at your business. If it's a clerk, I can promise you it's going to be the clerk's award, okay? But so somebody who works in your office doing admin. But for any other production type position, retail type position, selling, this is how you work it out. Then it's how do I work out, do I need a full-time, part-time, casual? You need to look at the rules in the types of employment here, which one will apply. Okay, so that's these provisions here, and that will set out what is the most suitable for your employment. Once you've done that, and you've got the apprentices provisions and junior employees and so on, but essentially it's full-time, part-time, casual. Whether or not they're an apprentice, well, I'm not going to tell you how to work out whether you're going to need an apprentice. That's not an award issue. That's a you issue. The award will just tell you what you've got to pay them. We know that, so that's fine. Ordinary hours of work, rostering arrangements. As I said, ordinary hours here, span of ordinary hours in column 2. So span of hours, this is when ordinary hours can be worked, between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. for day work. Okay. Ordinary hours may be worked from 5 a.m. in a news agency until midnight in a video shop, and other bits. But then you got down here, where are we? Shift work. You got shift work. So then this sets out the conditions for what happens if they're not working in those other hours. So you then look to see which circumstance fits the type of employee you want to hire. So I don't want to reiterate what I've gone over too much, but essentially that's how you look at an award and determine what is the right role and how do I employ a person and how do I find these terms and conditions, okay? I can't go through absolutely everything, obviously, because this has been quite long already, and I've only really scratched the surface. But if you have any queries, that's what I'm here for. I can help guide you through these things, and we can take you through the awards to take you to the absolutely correct clause, make sure you're covered by the right one, make sure you're in compliance all the way through, and give you the tools you need to make the decisions yourself the next time the problem arises. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got something out of it. If you've got any questions, by all means, please email me at ir@nbia.org.au, and I'll respond just as soon as I possibly can. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time.